If this text is too small to read, I'll read a little bit of it. I've been studying the occult for a long time, and I'm very familiar with D.I.D, dissociation identity disorder. If you don't know, it's basically multiple personality disorder done intentionally through trauma by shattering the mind, effectively honeycombing it, creating altars to weaponize and control the person for the group or the family's gain. I'm going to share some of these interviews from ex-occult people who left and are exposing the horrors that take place that the public doesn't hear about, such as born and raised ex-occult member Max Spears. Max was killed for leaving the occult or the Illuminati. Secondly, Nathan Reynolds is also was a part of these 13,300 bloodline families. This Luciferian occult and power. His interviews are, such as they were on the confessionals. If you want to look them up, I'll also be sharing a doctor explaining this. And lastly, lyrics from Linkin Park, Chester Bennington, rest in peace. You'd be surprised how much of his lyrics talk about this exact thing. It's common for a lot of people to not know what happened or have memories of it and go through a period of time of trying to remember or waking up and then go through this awakening process, and however that may end. You can tell in his first album he wasn't 100%. He was still trying to seek his father's approval and has since gave up on that. His father is John Podesta, by the way. If you look up John Podesta side by side with Chester Bennington, oh my God, you'll see how just how much these two look alike. It's clearly his father. He doesn't admit this. Dismisses it, saying he was a cop. He wasn't around much. That's a normal tactic done with these families. Again, John Podesta side by side with Chester Bennington. There's no doubt about it. And John Podesta there's already audios of this guy doing horrific stuff. This is not a thinking matter, or this is a knowing. I don't think this. I know this is what happened. With no further ado.
They were testing out how far they could push the trauma, because when certain sex rituals are done to a child under 5 years old, when a child is raped, and when a male child is raped, what happens is it releases the coiled serpent, or the kundalini, which is at the base of the spine, and it is opened up before it should be. Everybody has the kundalini raise at some point, maybe not everybody, but right. So it means coiled serpent, and it sits at the base of the spine, and when the serpent uncoils, it goes up the spinal column like this and comes to the brain stem there, and you come to an enlightened understanding. So you become an enlightened one, or the Illuminati, the illuminated one. When a male child is raped before the age of 5, it goes through something called the vasovagal shock. Now, when it's penetrated, the coiled snake uncoils very, very quickly, all the way up the spine to the top of the spine, and explodes here in the brainstem, which then shatters the consciousness into many, many pieces, like smashing a mirror. Then,
so all this all this kind of abuse that's been happening with many politicians, allegedly, a lot of stuff coming forward now about British political parties, British media, British thing and all that. There's a huge amount of stuff coming out now. Is that all part of that?
You cannot be in a high-level person in the Illuminati unless you have been illuminated by the Key of Solomon. Now they call this rape. They call rape like that to a young boy the Key of Solomon. And when that happens, when it bursts up here, it shatters. Then you are able to program these different altars. But not only that, when it shatters there, you have a photographic memory. Somehow it raises the IQ. It does a number of different things. Everybody who is in a position of power now has had the Key of Solomon used on them, so they have been raped in that way.
Which means that the whole structure of power in Britain,
yes,
the UK, probably Ireland, because of the recent terrible
sure.
things about 900 children, 800 children ritually massacred in Ireland, that means the whole power elite has been...
Yes. Yes. And they won't have you in the power elite unless it's been done to you.
I can't seem to find myself again. My walls are closing in.
Not a sense of confidence. I'm convinced that it's just too much pressure to take.
I felt this way before. So insecure.
One, for the audience that maybe they're new here or something, that is 100% part of the splitting and fragmenting is the trauma. They put people through trauma, and that creates these different personalities. And so if you're somebody who feels like there's another part of you that it gets buried a lot, or you're just like I feel like I'm a different person at times, you might want to consider what you've been through in life. You know, even me, like, I mean, I grew up in a very bad, not like nobody can hold a candle to what you grew up in, right? But like
lots can.
But it doesn't need to. Like, that's the thing. Like, everybody has trauma in their life that, if it goes unchecked, could lead to some kind of fragmenting of your personality. And like the environment that I grew up in was very physically violent, and so like it's just like there was always this part of me that would just sneak up out of nowhere. It's like a totally different person, you know. But that location where they did that to you, is that still around?
Yeah, it's still an active Catholic
several
church.
Questions on this topic of dissociative identity disorder, which used to be called multiple personality disorder. What is it? What does it look like? And why does it happen? Dissociative identity disorder develops when a person fails to form a total personality that integrates all aspects of yourself and your emotions. So instead of having multiple personalities, you have different pieces of one personality. This is something that can happen as a result of severe physical or sexual abuse. It becomes a way to survive something that may not seem like it's survivable. So to get through it, you do it by dissociating. Dissociation is a state of being disconnected from your environment or yourself. It's kind of like the opposite of being mindful when you're engrossed in the moment. Here, you're removed from the moment. Some people feel as though they're looking at themselves from outside of their body. And some people feel as though they're in a completely different place. In that case, it's a total escape.
Like night to day, something in here's not right today. Why am I so uptight today? Paranoia is all I got left. I don't know what stressed me first, how the pressure was fed, but I know just what it feels like to have a voice in the back of my head, like a face that I hold inside, face that awakes when I close my eyes, face that I watch every time I lie, face that laughs every time I fall. So I know that when it's time to sink or swim, the face inside is hearing me right underneath my skin. It's like a paranoid looking over my back. It's like a whirlwind inside of my head. It's like I can't stop what I'm hearing within. It's like the face inside is right beneath my skin. I know I've got a face in me, points out all my mistakes to me. You got a face on the inside too. Your paranoia is probably worse. I don't know what set me on first, but I know what I can't stand. Everybody acts, the fact of the matter is I can't add up to what you can, but everybody has a face that they hold inside. Face that awakes when I close my eyes. Face that watches every time they lie. Face that laughs every time they fall. So you know that when it's time to sink or swim, that the face inside is watching you too, right inside your skin.
How do you continue to function in a world with so much danger around you? You take on the identity of someone else who's very strong. This helps in the short term, but in the long term, it keeps you from becoming a whole integrated person. Now, the difference between this and a multifaceted individual is the person without DID sees themselves as being one person with different aspects of their personality. The person with DID doesn't take ownership of the facets. The facets become their own entities with no connection between them.
I come from a family that they believe they are descendants of the old gods. That's the best way to say it. That they believe that they are carriers of a seed line that gives them the divine right to rule. And that is what gives them justification spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, scientifically to dominate the lesser species known as humans. Humans literally means a lesser species of man. And they do not believe they are a human in the same way. They believe they are something other than. And that's descendants of this hierarchical ruling species that is from the celestial realm that descended in the days of Jared and came down and procreated with the daughters of men, and that they still trace their seed line back to Gilgamesh till Nimrod. And so this is what the dynastic families believe they have, is a superiority in their genetics on one side and the ability to commune with the divine. And so their children are progenitors of these, some might call them abreactions, mutations, these skills, psychic abilities, that kind of stuff, all variants of it. And so they raise up their children in this path with which involves a tremendous amount of shattering of the soul and the identity so that there's compartmentalization within, and it allows them the ability to train their child up in a way that makes them conducive towards the family. I call them the family. That's what I called them. You know, it's a better word for mafia than anything else. But no, we didn't call ourselves, like my family wouldn't ever call themselves illuminists.
Yeah.
Right? They're Luciferian. That's for certain. They worship Hallel and Shahar, as he's really known, but different reasons than what people are ascribed to, you know.
Pretty wild. Like, you know, to be like, have I ever encountered somebody who comes from that bloodline? Maybe. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people, but how many times do you come across somebody that does come from that bloodline and acknowledges it, knows it? You know, that's another thing. And so that's why I wanted to ask you that. So, you kind of hit on the childhood stuff right there in that kind of description. Was it something that came from complete childhood where it's like from your earliest memories it's just been kind of manipulated and jacked up, and what was that like for you growing up?
Well, my family set up a base of operations. They're from the East Coast. The Reynolds family on one side. My mother's family, just for clarity, I've never exposed a lot of the side of things that were going on with. Let me say it another way. The Reynolds family on my father's side, they're all from the East Coast out here, and they're a dynastic family. You know, like my great grandfather, a man named Don Potter Reynolds, was the architect, the head of engineering for the president, as the president of the American Society of Civil Engineering back in the 80s. And he's the one who put the new torch in the Luciferian hand of the Statue of Liberty of Columbia. And so he's a master Mason Luciferian in that way. And he was so much of the shot caller for the family at that time, especially when I came into being. And but my dad left that thing and moved out to the Southwest and started a different empire. And so a lot of how it works in the families is you got two main approaches. If you've got unlimited access to wealth, power, like really, I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about power, like unlimited raw power, where a phone call, the phone book is far more powerful than the bank account because it's who you know can open doors to power anywhere else in the entire world. And that's where everything was. So you can leave with nothing, but then you can go build. And if you need the phone book, there's a price to be paid. And the price to be paid is generally one of your children. This is like the reality. It seems bizarre to some, but a child is generally a chosen child out of the family is given over as an offering to the family. And they're the ones who's going to go through this left-hand path. They're going to experience the desecration of their soul, their identity, and they're going to become an agent for the family that is owned completely. And there's like a legal trustee that is given over to it. There's a board of directors that sits over it. Like these are real legal confines for how the wealth is distributed out there. And so in order to build your empire, you got to be able to go prove yourself. And that's what he ended up doing out in the Southwest. And he moved to Arizona, an area called Flagstaff, Arizona. And where I was born, that is a place that's a high place, Mount Humphreys. It's a volcanic peaks that sit there. And the top of it is where the Hopi Indian and a lot of people had gathered forever to commune with the fallen. They believed that the sons of the sky would come down every season at the winter solstice, and they would abide from the winter solstice to the summer solstice there. And so this was a place where they would give their daughters over to them. This is Hopi mythology, like 101, you know, and they would make these kachina dolls, which were an effigy of the what I would say is a watcher angel that would come, and the daughter would be given to him, and she would place that over her bed throughout her life, you know, and that's her familiar spirit, right? That's where I was born into. And the people that still practice that old religion, that's the way I refer to it, they still do this. And they still take their children up there to give them over to them on these high days. And so I was born into that, and I was born through that seed line and into that ritual magic world. And but my mother's side are extreme Catholics and Jesuits through and through. And so her father ran a different operation in Southern California, which was much more based on the child exploitation side of the equation. And he operated out of Lake Havasu City, Arizona. Lake Havasu, for those of you that are unfamiliar, sits in the absolute desert border of Arizona and California, and it has the Colorado River that's been dammed up, and they created an artificial lake there. And it was a secret military base back in World War II. It was called Site 6, and it was a stopover point crossing the desert for soldiers going there, and they would made it into a rest and recuperation area. And so it was a party city from its foundation. It had a lot of underground structures that were built into it as a refueling point, and in the 1960s, a guy named Robert P. McCulloch bought it. And he bought it, and he also purchased the London Bridge that crossed the River Thames, and he had it shipped over here stone by stone. And while they were doing that, they excavated 80 bodies that were entombed inside it in a practice that's called annulment, where you would sacrifice a person and bury them alive in the walls of the foundation. And so there's all these chambers in this facility of the London Bridge where they would do torture and all kinds of ritual stuff. But this is why the sing-song nursery rhyme, the London Bridge is falling down, falling down. That's a nursery rhyme to talk about how you have to give your children over to the government so you can hold up the London Bridge. And they would literally take their children. This is in the history book of the museum at Lake Havasu City. You can see these bodies of these children that were sacrificed inside the walls of that space. So he bought that as a charged object. He bought that as a portal mechanism. And they built in Lake Havasu City with another designer from the Disneyland, and they literally built a pleasure island. That's what it was facilitated for. And they designed it so that it would be a retirement community that would facilitate the exploitation of children. And that's exclusively what that city was founded and built for. And so the original founders of that operated out of the Knights of Columbus predominantly as a wing of the Jesuits. And that's the business down there. It's an industry to cover up child abuse. You got a bunch of old men running around with little boys, and everybody thinks they're grandchildren and nephews and nieces and all that rest. And so all along that area down there is where I would be taken from my earliest days and shattered, abused, traumatized, systemically so. But it's for behavioral modification purposes. That's the end goal of the abuse, is to shatter your willingness to resist and to break your will. And once they own you and you have been woefully convinced you can never get out, you give in, and to shatter your willingness to resist and to break your will. And once they own you and you have been woefully convinced you can never get out, you give in. And that's what happened. I became the person who I was died, and the person they wanted me to become was what was born out of that disgusting Phoenix ashes,
Wow. How long does that process take? I mean, was this like just a few years of your childhood, or was this like a constant thing throughout your teen years, or what?
I mean, every individual is different. How long does it take to break a dog? That was the approach they took with me. You find out everybody has different talents and giftings and capabilities and capacities. And so in the beginning phase, a lot of it is you're just raising them up a little more normally. There's a lot of early trauma stuff that's hard to articulate and can be messy with memory but as I got older, like 5 and 6 years old, man, it became very apparent that I had a desire for justice. That was like the sole deepest desire that I had, was I wanted people to know freedom, because I had been so deprived of it from day one. And there's this practice of switching mothers. You'll have a cult mother, and then they have your regular mom, and then they create this trauma bonding so that you'll bond with anybody that they want you to do. And this happens by taking you away from your mom and your dad constantly and giving you new mom and dad, new uncles, new aunts, right? And so you're living in this constant state of destabilization. And so it's as that destabilization happens and that patterning is built up, that's when a lot of the programming comes in to stabilize these new personalities and these new pursuits and endeavors. But I had this zealousness to see injustice stopped, and they preyed on that. And so they gave me opportunities to fight back against these perverts who were abusing children. And they would build up in me this rage, this need for vengeance. And then they would let me release that on somebody. And in the beginning, it was people I knew were bad guys, guys I'd seen abuse children. And I would slice their throats up, man. I would tear them to freaking ribbons. And I loved it because I finally felt like I could stop something that I knew was evil. And I thought this was the way to stop all these monsters in the world. I just wanted to hunt monsters in the night. I just wanted to go down in the tunnels and hunt. And that's what they kind of created in me, this just freak of a need to hunt. And then they would bury that away and you go back to normal life and you go back to Christian school and you go back to the regular life, and your parents act like it's just normal, you know, but they're like, you got to have cover stories for why your child's all beat up and bruised and your face is smashed in. Like I've had multiple reconstructive plastic surgeries from fights, you know, like fighting for my stinking life. You got to have cover stories. So we would move around constantly. My parents would move us around sometimes every 6 months or not. But once you have a friend or a teacher or somebody notices, starts asking questions, or you start bonding with somebody that's outside the cult, they're not going to tolerate that. And so we would move all the time. And now my sisters on the other side, they weren't roped into this thing. I was in a male cult. This is the Brotherhood of the Snake down in Lake Havasu. But this is, my sisters weren't caught up in the same thing, but they were caught up by the family as a whole. And so this carried on, and we moved into this place called Sholo Pine Top Lakeside, Arizona. And this is where an area, they would move to these specific high places where the veil is really thin. There's a very famous story about a guy who had an alien encounter out there, Snowflake, Arizona. And this is an area where I was right on the Apache reservation. White Mountain Apache Reservation was 100 yards from my door. And they would go out into the Apache reservation to these specific high places and do these rituals and this ritual magic. And a lot of that involved. That was when it was the worst to me, because I was old enough to understand how vile what was happening, you know, in ritual magic. And at the same time, I was the most readily influenced by the family side of the equation. I thought the family and the military was the way out, but I hated this occult side of it because I saw men become monsters physically in front of my eyes. Other things come out of people's mouths. Other things come through their eyes. Like I witnessed enough transfiguration to know that this stuff is 100% stalking in the darkness. And I don't want that to rule me forever, you know, but it was hard to not resist. You know, you're in it. Man, that's brutal. Because I think on one side of it, I think we really do have an entire subspecies of creatures that do exist mostly inside the earth, and they are not readily surface dwelling anymore. And I do believe, like in Lake Havasu City, Arizona, man, inside the London Bridge is a massive room, like a throne room, where they engage in this magic. But this Brotherhood of the Serpent, they call upon Nahash, the dragon. And
would that be in normal terms Satan?
Yeah, most people know him as Satan, right? Yeah. But like there is a great red dragon. Like it's a physical, that's what he looks like in reality. He was cursed, and man, he made him a monster. Yahweh made him a monster. And they would commune with these things. There's 13 grandfathers take 13 of their grandsons, and they bring them into these rooms and do these things on these specific times and rituals for all kinds of stuff. But the dragons tell them the future. This is like always what they've been able to do is like Satan leads Yeshua up onto a great high place and says, I shows him all the nations of the earth and all their kingdoms and their reigns in a moment of time. He shows them the future. That's what they do. They can show you what's to come. This is why we get hunted by them. He knows if we're going to be part of his adversaries. He knows if we're going to be on his enemy list. And that's why he targets us at our youth. That's what so happens. So many people, they're like, why has my life been a nightmare from the beginning? It's because you have a purpose and a destiny that adversary absolutely categorically does not want to come to pass. It's a real life Terminator scenario. And so he sends his assets in to destroy people, to ruin their life. And those meeting places happen when they sit down in these rooms and they try to call up these creatures. It's from inside the earth. It wasn't like ethereal mist. They were physical things that would come out of these tunnels, and they would come into the room and they would consume the offerings that were given there. And then the words of the Nahash would come forth, and they would prophesy to these guys. Like they would prophesy out of the mouth of the serpent what each one of their life callings, their shots. He's the shot caller, man. It's like a pimp from prison. He's calling the shots, and you had a bunch of fallen watchers that were in prison in Tartarus for a reason. Yeah, but they got ways of getting messages out, just like the cronies in jail today, and that's what a lot of people are dealing with. They think they're dealing with the top dog, and they're like, I'm finally into the big game. And it's like you're dealing with, a private in the hierarchy, but he can masquerade like a general. And so some people are really dealing with death himself, and some of them are dealing with one of his princes. And this is what my family's covenant was with the dragon. They didn't mess around, man. They went all the way to the chain of command. They uncovered a bunch of my great grandfather's grandfather was an archaeologist who dug into the Indian mounds out in the Ohio River Valley. And they started finding a priest class that was these serpent worshipers. And that's what they started calling upon. And they started trying to wake up and rise up Huachiblos, which is these deities, these dragon fire deities that
This is
demand
in Ohio?
where these mounds were found. It's the Ohio River Valley. Yeah.
Are we talking about serpent mounds?
Yeah. Well, this wasn't specifically, not that I'm aware of that it was specifically a serpent mound, but it was a mound that was in an area that was now being farmed.
Okay.
And so whether or not it was specifically a serpent mound, it was not identified as that. But they ended up finding a lot of these ancient tomes. They found the writings of this priest class, and they started using their magic to call back up these fallen ones. And they were, the part of the trade is the priest class has all this secret knowledge that they then use to rule the kings with. And that's what they wanted. So that's how the Reynolds family, this is also documented in a book called The Gilded Leaf by Patrick Reynolds, who was a bloodline descendant specifically and in the actual inheritance of the Winston cigarette company, the tobacco empire that ended up buying Nabisco Foods that ended up running the world.
What relation is it to you? Like an uncle?
I don't know that I am a bloodline relative of that guy.
Oh, okay.
Patrick Reynolds specifically. My Reynolds family is the one that does the black gold stuff, all the secret, disgusting, dirty money. They're the white launderers of the money, right? But you got to have your seedy, corrupt group. And that's what my family did. They did all the dirty stuff.
Wow.
And so but in his book, in his firsthand account, they talk about the Joshua coin and them using a coin that was from Judas that he betrayed Yeshua with, and the 30 pieces of silver that was the blood guilt money. They would touch that silver coin to anything they wanted, and it would grow an empire. The cost was always a massive bloodshed and a massive demand of life. And that's always what the serpent required. He wanted life. And so, like, on one side of the equation, that's what they used to build the Reynolds empire. That's what they used to go down Alcoa and all the aluminum industry and all of the stuff they spray on us and the stuff they poison us with and inject us with and all the variables of complexities of targeting that they've done against us. That all comes from that covenant that those two brothers sat down, did, and entered into a blood covenant with the dragon, man. And this is what the fruit of it was. Well, my family entered into that on a different route through this priest class thing. And that's what they would practice down there. And that's the same old religion that people have been using a long time. So on one side of it, I've seen physical beings that are definitely not like our animals up here come out of these spaces from inside the earth. I've seen in deep underground military bases, dogmen, like you would kind of describe them, some more humanized. And I think a lot of those were experimentation and genetic splicing. I think a lot of that was gene editing stuff that I've seen. But I do believe that some of these things are holdovers from the old days. They're the last of their kinds, and they've been breeding them, right? And I believe that that's the stuff that's prophesied that's going to come back out and cause the hearts of men to stop for fear of looking after these things that are coming up on the earth. That's why everywhere I went throughout my youth, I could go to these tunnels and these caves and call out, and I could hear them, and they would call back, and it's like it's a seductive power that draws you back into it.
You could call out to them? Like,
yeah.
Was it like a language or a sound or what?
Oh, yeah, man. You can learn to call to them. You can go out here in these hills out here and do it. You can still do it tonight on these full moons and stuff. You can start calling out, and you'll think you'll hear coyotes at first, and then all of a sudden it's a totally different, it's a different sound that starts to resonate. And then it's a different one that calls off from over here, right? You got to understand, some of these guys that you think are just neighbors and stuff or just people, like, this is what they keep in their barn, And so I just got so lost in the world of the dead. And I just wanted to find some semblance of innocence and purity. And I could not find it in people because everybody was manipulating me. I was nothing but an asset to them. And I didn't know which end of me they wanted. Do they want my skills? Do they want what do they want from me? And so it perverted my understanding of people. And so I just fled to animals. And that's where I talk to these creatures and live with them. Well, then you start encountering these other ones, and you start to befriend them. And it just becomes like a pack. Well, then my family would rip me away from that and move, and I would have to try to find a new one. And there was this just constant destabilization. And so there's a lot of people that get caught in that world, man. And people brand them as feral children, like you might want to call it, or whatever you want to call it, man. But they're survivors. That's what they are, man. They're overcomers. They're the remnant. They're the leftovers of nightmares. And you know what? There's some of the most incredible people or things that have ever been. And that's why I'm here to preach the gospel to every creature. That's what it says. My commission from my king who gave me my marching orders is to preach the gospel to every creature. And that's what I'll do, man. I'll do it in the tunnels. I'll do it everywhere from the tops of the roofs to the bottom of the earth. But I am much more familiar and comfortable down there than I am out here. This is the world of oddities where people think this stuff is like legend and myth and strangeness. And it's like you go into these families, they broker deals with this stuff. They get down with these things and they generationally raise their children to have that seed line in them. So it's a different world than what most people are used to. But I tell you what, these animals they carry a history of what this land used to look like and what these people used to be. And it wasn't that long ago when I was young. I just wanted to die. I just wanted to die so bad, man. All my life, I just wanted to die and I never could die. And no matter what anybody ever tried, always I lived, and I was so tired of it. And I ended up going to this church and these people like loved on me, not the way like Christians had in the past in the same way. Like my family was Christians. I went to all kinds of different denominations throughout all of this experience, but me and my family would pedal me back out the back door, And so my version of what a biblical minister was capable of was so jacked up. I thought they were weak cowards. That's what I knew Christians as. Like I knew that pastors are easy to manipulate. I was a screaming nightmare at night. How do you tell that to somebody before we weren't sleeping together before we got married? She didn't know that. She didn't know that I would have these terrors of the night. She didn't know that I was a different person at night. And then all of a sudden into our marriage, my dad comes back in because he wants to control again. He wants to make the money. And I'm a highly monopolized individual to these families. And they wanted that again. And they wanted to turn on the old other side, which is this Nathan and Jason side. And they wanted to make money with that because their business was failing. They're in the bed and breakfast industry now. That's the good cover for all kinds of filthy stuff to happen at a hotel. And they film it and document it and keep it in private drives and create a blacklist on people. But
so that's
the family business.
You're talking about like Epstein type stuff?
Oh, yeah.
So I know this, but just for the audience, you're saying Epstein isn't the only Epstein.
That's like late in the game guy.
Yeah.
And I know most people think that's super high level. That's still mid-level in the world of families. He's not the family man in the same way, right? You can run into a different synagogue of Satan everywhere you turn, right? You can run into the great whore of Babylon that sits in Rome and Vatican City all over the place. But then there's these old bloodlines too that are a completely different thing. And they have different ways of controlling people. And information and secrets is what my family trafficked in predominantly. And so my parents on one side, they had a great Christian front in everything they did, but inside, that's where business happened, and it's because they're split personality people. One side is wholly given over to this and the other side is wholly given over to something else, and so that's what I was raised in. And it was as normal as breathing, but my wife didn't know any of this stuff, and she was not from a family like this. She grew up in like a normal middle-class American Christian home, and I did go to focus on the family kind of stuff, and
poor girl,
bro, it was on. So what the trigger event that changed the whole story was my dad moved back in with us for a few weeks.
How'd you let that happen?
You don't exactly have free will. It's like a real important thing to understand when you're a yes man still. I didn't have anything to really fight for besides my wife at the time. I didn't have children, and like they castrated me when I was young. They make you a eunuch so that you can go into the king's.
Really? So even having kids is a miraculous thing.
That's what started it all, dude.
Wow.
So what happened though, my dad changed me around and he brought out the other side of me. And so you wake up in the middle of a marriage and I don't know who my wife is. And I go from being this happy, fun, loving Nate, wild guy that's shirtless all the time playing and diving into stuff to this guy that's hydrophobic, terrified of water. And is wearing body armor and carrying secret concealed blades and making poisons at night. And she's like, what? Goes by a different name, disowned all my friends, burned my phones, went full protocol. People, if they want prayer, come to the front, man. I run up there and I fall on my face and I weep like I've never wept in my life. Just desperate for that evil, like that latent seed out. I want it out so bad. I want to be a man of free will. I want to know what others took for granted from their youth, which is to make a decision without somebody else's manipulations in your life. Like I just wanted freedom, and I wanted my child to never have to know the world that I was born into. I wanted her so badly to get to choose for herself what her future would become. And I was so inadequately equipped to do that for her. I had nothing. but I had a willingness to fall on my face and cry out to the one who had everything. And I believed on him and I called on him and just was wrenching my heart out on that floor, man. And this guy, Tom Dunn, he laid down on the floor next to me, man, and was like, "What's going on? You know, you're clearly upset, dude. You know, like." And he gave me a transplant. You know, he took me out of that family of death, and he gave me a branch of life to live again with. You know, and that's where it started. Somebody else at the same conference, random person walked up to me, handed me this folder, and disappeared, like straight up disappeared in a line I was in. And I was like, "What?" And she's like, "You need to read this." And it was all these prayers for breaking the curses from generational sins of Freemasonry. And I was like, "What?" And I'm like, "What is this?" It was Isaiah 54 Ministries. It's on my website, but they burned that website to the ground after I put my book out. But I've got it archived and stuff if people want to still see that. But I went through it back in Colorado and I prayed those prayers, man. And I did all this renunciation for all of these oaths that my family had taken and that things that I had been a witness of. And that's when it was on. That's when the war kicked off, man, was because then all of the memories, everything was there at the forefront. And that's when they knew I was not going to be a part of it. And that's when I went direct back to them and was basically like, "Listen, I forgive you guys personally for the wrongs and the evil that you have done to me. But you need to understand, Grandpa still is a pervert. Like, and you're still taking your grandchildren to him, and that better stinking stop." You know, like it was like a showdown. Initially, my dad's like, "I'm sorry. I know this stuff happened to you. I'm really sorry that it happened to you. Like, I'm the dad. I'll fix it." And then at the same time, he was like, "Don't tell your sisters. Don't you dare tell your sisters. You can tell anybody you want. I don't care. Just don't tell your sisters." So that's immediately what I did, right? I'm like, "Game on, son. You want to fight that way?" So I went and told my sisters. And then it was just this, she curling up in a fetal position and reverting back to this infancy thing and just like, I don't remember. And then they bring in somebody else to live with her, like a handler to scrub her and control her because they have big families still that are still in, you know, and that's
So your
a
sisters
big
are still in?
business. Oh, yeah.
So when you talk to your sisters,
I have not talked to them since.
okay,
It was the last time I
They-
talked to them.
they didn't remember at first, and you were triggering memories. Is that what was
No,
going on?
Yes and no. Well, my oldest sister, I don't name any of my sisters because there's a lot of innocence still
Sure.
at play. I'll name all kinds of people, just not them. But my oldest sister could pick which client you wanted, you know.
And she was finding that on Facebook.
Bro, you'd find this on. They think it's cute. They're like, "Oh, it's just cute little babies and boys and stuff." And I'm like,
Jeez.
"No, dude. My family had a photo album that they would hand to a customer, and they could pick what version of me they wanted. Like this is like a menu that they offer to clients. This is really how like the business works. And it's
So-
like this is still a reality. So
All right, version of you. So it's like they pick a version and they got what push the certain buttons to get that version of you to manifest.
yeah, then they get a code book that goes with it, and that brings that personality out. You know, because
Really?
if you want a cross-dressing girl, this is how you get that.
Wow.
And that's what that whole personality is shaped to be with. Or if you want somebody that's into different things, they have this. And so that's a code book. You know, that's like the little red book that controls somebody is a real thing. Well, sometimes you give people a page from it and they pay for that page for a certain amount of time. That's what they get. But others, they're going to get a page from Jason. You know, that's what the military bought from my family was my black book so that they could have an asset as their own. And then they're going to rewrite the program and then make it just theirs. And that's what my dad didn't want anymore. He wanted back that chain of command. He wanted full control and sovereignty over me that the military took away from him. He wanted that back. That's why he went and tried to meddle. The problem is he woke up the wrong guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a very dangerous person to wake up who knows how to burn houses.
Yeah. I'm glad we're friends. I hope we're friends.
You betcha.
I mean,
man, you're
just
advancing the
mention,
right
but
kingdom, bro.
I like you. I like you. So hopefully you like me. Man, I love my job. I meet such interesting people. So, you know, when I was driving tractor trailer, I would listen to a lot of podcasts, and that was in the days of the wild west of YouTube, where they didn't just take everything down. You know, this is like pre Jones takedown of 2017. You know, that was the marker of everything. And I would hear, you know, people talk about people like you, Dizdar, and he's passed, right?
Yeah, man, they killed him and Rob Skiba in the same week. Breathing to me to go through that world, and that was normal, that murders happened all the time and nobody ever cared. Nobody ever cared, right? But also the vast majority of what you do and you're trained in is to kill people covertly, which means you make it look like something other than an incidental death. or an accidental death, as opposed to oh no, that's a homicidal death. So a lot of it is learning how to put things in people's body that cause them to die. Maybe not right away, maybe later. And so this is the arts of poisons. And that's why people will turn to the Jesuits to learn that tradecraft, because they're some of the best at it, right? That's what so much of it is, learning how to destroy people's vehicles so they don't work properly, or they suddenly just gas on the way all the way. There's lots of it involves throwing people off of cliffs and buildings and stuff like that, so that it's the banker suicide, whatever it may be. That's why the vast majority of this stuff is non-prosecutable, because all of it, if you look into it, or if they start finding where these bodies are, they're going to look like accidental deaths. That's what the vast majority of it is. But at the end of the day, like, I believe that the truth is what will set me free. Like, I know his word, and I believe his word, and I know that it is what sets me free. And at the end of the day, my physical body on this earth is irrelevant towards the kingdom that is coming. Like, I have a duty to continue to advance the kingdom of righteousness no matter what. And I have a duty to speak the truth, because he says in here very clearly that anything that I did in secret is going to be brought up to the light. Everything they've done in secret is coming to the light. And I'd rather be the one to bring it to the light than the guy who's my enemy to do it when I don't want it to happen. So I knew sooner or later, if I'm still going to live and have a family, I better tell people my worst things right now, as opposed to it coming to light later on when I've been trying to do ministry and trying to raise a family and just be a righteous man and trying to no longer be the gray man, and that's a war that still happens internally on a regular basis, because I find cults everywhere. I find child abusers everywhere. And it's hard to turn off old, well-seasoned, strong muscles to just turn their world inside out. But you realize that there's a way that you have to do this. And anybody that's out there on the front line that's spoken about these things, you potentially do suffer the consequences of it. But you know what? At the end of the day, I'm going to advance the kingdom no matter what it costs is. I've had police surround my vehicle before. I've had experiences like that. Not for me, miraculously, but for somebody else, And every time I'm kind of waiting for that shoe to drop, I felt that kind of anticipation that it could happen. It could, and that's part of it. But if that starts it's going to unzip a whole lot on the things that's called discovery in a lawsuit. Which
that shouldn't be discovered.
Dang right. And
Yeah.
that's why these things get dismissed, because of reasons of national security. And nobody's going to have a freaking idea of what happened in there. And that's what I experienced plenty of times.
Yeah.
I've seen it never come to court, because that guy, like when I do blood tests, like that gets sealed. Like if I tried to donate blood today, you would not believe what the heck happens to the poor guy that I hand that blood off to. Right? He's going to go through a freaking hell, and they're going to recover that because it's classified technology, what's inside there. They're like, you're not allowed to have access to this stuff. Like that's what a lot of these soldiers come out of these programs, and they're like, you're not allowed to give blood ever. If you go to a hospital and you go to a checkup, you better call us before you do. And this is the stuff that ends up happening through the rest of your life that they don't tell you about when you're like, yeah, I'm around all these guys and I want to be stronger. Yeah, I want to be stronger. I want to be strong. I want to be able to carry all kinds of stuff. And they're like, here, you just come line up and take another shot in your arm. You're like, yeah, I feel great. I feel like you're dying for a while. And then all of a sudden you're like, I am carrying 260 pounds. I'm a little dude. I was like, this is great. Give me more. Right. And that was like, I could go off all day on that. But what they don't tell you is the side effects. And you're like, yeah, you're probably going to only have a kidney for about another year. And that's what happens. You're like, why are all my teammates dying? Why are all of them dying? All of them. Why are all of them dead?
Their purpose was served.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like, it's weird. I didn't know it wasn't normal until I sat down. My wife and I stopped watching the TV, man. And we started talking to each other face to face like this. And all of these stories began to come out about what her childhood was like. And I was like, what? That's what a Christmas is like?
Wow.
I'm like, I realized I was raised in a cult. It just was so controlled that I didn't realize it was not normal to have grandpas doing that to their grandsons. Like, I genuinely didn't understand the level of insane life I had, because I'd been around. I was only allowed access to other people that had that kind of stuff. So then if I talked about it, they're like, yeah, of course. That's what uncles do. It's just creepy, weird stuff, whatever. But her and I are talking about this stuff, and I'm starting to tell my stories to her, and she is like sick. She's like, that's not okay. Like, that should never happen. I'm like, I'm telling you about one day. I was like, what do you mean never happen? Like, happened for years. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I didn't have the paradigm of understanding what a normal person life was like. My parents, my mom, the women would stay awake when there was these family reunions because it was disgusting. And they didn't want their children getting. And so they would stay awake for days. And I thought that was normal. They'd be awake watching everybody, like all the time for days. And they would be out of their mind by the end of it, right? They're like hallucinating and all the rest. But they just didn't want their children or grandchildren to go through what they knew. My parents, my mom, the women would stay awake when there was these family reunions because it was disgusting. And they didn't want their children getting. And so they would stay awake for days. And I thought that was normal. They'd be awake watching everybody, like all the time for days. And they would be out of their mind by the end of it, right? They're like hallucinating and all the rest, but they just didn't want their children or grandchildren to go through what they knew their husband did, or they knew that his brothers did in the Knights of Columbus. Like, they just wanted to try to protect him. But I thought it was normal that parents and moms would be awake for days on end and just suddenly pick up one day and we're going to travel 2,700 miles, and like, that's normal. I thought that's how people were. I didn't understand people needed like rest and recovery and all of this. You could just switch personalities and keep going and backlogging it and use augmentation from whatever, drugs, people, anything you needed, but like they extracted all kinds of stuff out of people, and that was what they would run off of, and it was their little serum, that they would, their nectar of the gods that they would run off of. But it's just human hormone isotopes in a lot of ways, blood plasmas and stuff like that they would use. But this stuff would just jack them up and they just go for days, and it's this new way of augmenting the brain that they utilize. And other people think they're just buying little pills, but that's what they're getting, it's the byproduct of that industry. When you is to convince people that the Bible is not supernatural. They have raped our scriptures of all the supernatural elements in there. Like in Isaiah 13, when you pick up a scripture today, a Bible today, and it says ostriches are going to dwell there and hairy, shaggy goats are going to dwell there. They took away the word satyr. They don't want people to know about Pan and the Baphomet and Azazel. They don't want his identity known. They don't want people to think that there's an actual hierarchical structure to these entities. They have names and characters and temples and priests. They take away the ostrich, and they give us the ostrich instead of the siren. They take away the mermaid-looking creature with serpentine legs coming out of her rear end. That's a kidnap. That's her. And they don't want people to understand that's what dwells in these places. That's what's in these waters of these lakes. She would, I could throw my blades in water and she would bring them back to me.
Really?
That's what she offers. She offers mystically charged magical weapons to warriors. That's the whole Merlin myth. It's not a myth. These are like histories just repackaged to make them palatable in cultures that it's illegal to talk about it. These people operate under this legal groundwork. And when they need to get their stories out and they want to preserve their legends and their truths, they couch them in mysteries. That's the mystery religion. That's not how the Father operates. Yeshua literally said, I've done everything open in the open. You do what you do in secret.
Your courage just shines through in everything that I've seen that you've done. And I really, truly thank you for that and for speaking out.
Thank you for saying that. It was actually never my intention to do that. I think that because of circumstances in 2008, I was so needed to find out what was happening to me that I sort of that was the route that I had to go to try and find out stuff. So essentially I started it and began doing it for sort of selfish reasons really, and then it opened up, and then I wanted to help other people who'd been through anything that was even remotely similar to what I'd been through. So that's how that began.
So what advice would you give to anybody right now who is just starting that road of looking within and looking for answers?
Yeah. Definitely, there's so much confusion outside. There's so much confusion going on outside, and so many different people telling so many different things that, especially at the moment, what I've been trying to do, and people who I speak to, and friends of mine, and people who I work with, I have been the one thing that this particular consciousness stream that is controlling, or has its hands on controlling the planet at the moment, is vampiric in nature, which is vampiric. It's a taking energy. It's not giving energy. It doesn't have a central source where it cannot self-sustain. It has to take from others. So with all the confusion that's going on the outside, I started to find the best information when I was away from any other distractions, away from even other people, just being alone and actually allowing myself to be alone and just being with myself, without music, without television, without anything. And then sort of things, the longer I spent by myself just doing that, even without books or anything, because books are even a distraction, so things would start coming to me, and memories would start coming to me, and that sort of like quiet voice that's inside of you would start opening up, and there would be a clearer clearer connection between me and it, even though it is one and the same thing. And like I said, there's so many different things and so many different people saying different things. I think that to start learning to trust yourself, and then you sort of take what feels right to you and personally to you, and leave the rest alone and put the rest down. And that's what I did to start with. It didn't matter if somebody else said to me, like, this is it, this is for sure, this is this is how that happened, and this particular story, and this Anunnaki did this and that. Well, that didn't matter. Like, if it felt right to me, then I would take hold of that and then sit alone with that feeling, or sit alone with that information and see how it sat with me.
Cannot take this anymore. Saying everything I've said before. All these words, they make no sense. I find bliss in ignorance. Less I hear, the less you say. You'll find that out anyway. Just like before. Everything you say to me takes me one step closer to the edge, and I'm about to break. I need a little room to breathe, 'cause I'm one step closer to the edge. I'm about to break. I find the answers aren't so clear. Wish I could find a way to disappear. You take away if I give in. My life, my pride is broken. You have to think you're never wrong. You live what you love. You have to act like you're someone. You live what you love. You want someone to have like you. You live what you love. You wanna share what you've been from. You live what you love. Forfeit the game before somebody else takes you out of the frame. Put your name to shame, cover up your face. You can't run the race, the pace is too fast, you just won't last. You like to think you're never wrong. I'm tired of being what you want me to be. Feeling so faithless, lost under the surface. Don't know what you're expecting of me. Put under the pressure of walking in your shoes. Every step that I take is another mistake to you. I've become so numb, I can't feel you there. Become so tired, so much more aware. I'm becoming this. All I want to do is be more like me and be less like you. Can't you see that you're smothering me? Holding too tightly, afraid to lose control. 'Cause everything that you thought I would be is falling apart right in front of you. Every step that I take is another mistake to you. And every second I waste is more than I can take. I've become so numb, and I know I may end up failing too. But I know you were just like me, with someone disappointed in you. Never stops, all these thoughts and the pain attached to them. Sometimes I wonder why this is happening. It's like nothing I can do would distract me when I think of how I shot myself in the back again. 'Cause from the infinite words I can say, I put all the pain you gave to me on display, but didn't realize instead of setting it free, I took what I hated and made it a part of me. Never goes away. Never goes away. And now you become a part of me. You'll always be right here. You become a part of me. You'll always be my fear. I can't separate myself from what I've done. Giving up a part of me. I've let myself become you. Memories come you my cure. I tightly lock the door. I try to catch my breath again. I hurt much more than any time before. I don't know who to trust. No surprise.
Everyone feels so far away from me.
Heavy thoughts sift through dust and the lies.
Trying not to break, but I'm so tired of this deceit. Every time I try to make myself get back up on my feet, all I ever think about is this. All the tiring time between, and how trying to put my trust in you just takes so much out of me.
Take everything from the inside and throw it all away. 'Cause I swear, for the last time, I will trust myself. Try to give you warning, but everyone ignores me.
Told you everything loud and clear.
But nobody's listening. Call to you so clearly, but you don't want to hear me.
Told you everything loud and clear.
But nobody's listening. Sometimes I need to remember just to breathe. Sometimes I need you to stay away from me. Sometimes I'm in disbelief, I didn't know. Somehow I need you to go. Just giving myself back and don't stay. Sometimes I feel like I trusted you too well. Sometimes I just feel like screaming at myself. Sometimes I'm in disbelief, I didn't know. Somehow I need to be alone.
When this began, I had nothing to say, and I'd get lost in the nothingness inside of me. I was confused, and I let it all out, mind that I'm not the only person with these things in mind. But all of me can see the words revealed is the only real thing that I've got left to feel. Just stuck, hollow and alone, and the fault is my own, and the fault is my own.
I wanna heal, I wanna feel what I thought was never real. I wanna let go of the pain I felt so long.
Erase all the pain till it's gone.
I will never know myself until I do this on my own. And I will never feel anything else until my wounds are healed. I will never think anything till I break away from me.
I remember what they taught to me. Remember condescending talk of who I ought to be. Remember
Push aside, so let me go. It's easier to run, replacing this pain with something wrong. It's so much easier to go than face all this pain here all alone. Something has been taken from deep inside of me. A secret I've kept locked away, no one can ever see. Wounds so deep they never show, they never go away. Like moving pictures in my head, for years and years they've played.
if I could change, I would. Take up the pain, I would. Retrace every wrong move that I made, I would. If